Hey Blenders, it's Sean here to introduce you guys to a bonus episode of ReelBlend, where we are joined by the co-directors of A24's new film, God's Creatures. This is Saela Davis and Anna Rose Holmer, who joined the show to discuss their difficult adult drama that is in theaters currently as we speak, hopefully in a theater near you. Now, we're going to have a full review of this movie on the show on Friday. I wasn't able to check this one out ahead of time. Jake and Kevin handled the interview, but I was able to listen to the full conversation. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. The two directors discuss their process, how they sort of handle being co-directors on the set. They get into a lot of the research that they had to put into the town in Ireland that was an inspiration for this story that they wanted to tell. And then there's an element of the weather and water that is really integral to the storytelling. And they talk a bit at length about the complications that come with shooting on water and how they overcame that. They are veterans of the industry, but this is their debut as filmmakers. They talk about a lot of the obstacles that they had to overcome in order to put that together, but then the team that rallied behind them. I think you guys are going to find it really, really fascinating as you prepare to go out and see God's Creatures yourself. So without further ado, this is the interview with Saela Davis and Anna Rose Holmer on behalf of God's Creatures.
I guess maybe a stupid question, but I'm really curious about the concept of two directors. And I'm really curious as to how that works on set, how decisions are made, how direction is given to the actors and the crew. Could you guys explain, I guess, just the concept of how co-directing works on set?
This is our jam. Directing as a team for us is very natural. I mean, we can only speak to how we work. So I'm sure that just like, there's so many variations in style for individual directors. I'm sure it also varies team to team for those sets. But for us, our collaboration is almost a decade old. This is our debut as a directing team, but we've been collaborating in lots of different iterations for a really long time. And we've come to know each other really well, especially because we work as writers together. So it's like, first and foremost, we have this trust and love for each other and each other's instincts. And that's why we want to be standing side by side. Like if the person who I think has the best taste, the best judgment, the best ideas is Saela, that's why we're a team. So I think that's kind of the spirit in which we arrive on set, is that if you have an instinct, if you have an urge, a creative itch, step forward, and that the other is going to be there to support and challenge and facilitate in whatever way possible.
Yeah. And then, the foundation for us really starts in the script writing or the development of the script phase, where we kind of talk through all the ideas we have, all the creative inspirations, kind of like what is the end goal. And like, we keep that in mind. And then, when we're on set, like we're communicating with our actors, like the same intentions, we're communicating with our crew, the same intentions. So even if there are moments where we have to separate, we're giving like essentially the same note, And so it starts with like that base of the, script and the ideas that we're attempting to accomplish when we're in production.
How much, I'm sorry, Kevin, I was just going to follow up. I'm curious as to just how much like getting on the same page before you show up on set together. Cause I'd imagine if you're in front of the cast and crew, you two can give two different directions at the same time. So is it a matter of really like before you guys go out there, making sure, okay, this is our focus of the day kind of thing?
Yeah. And like, within each scene, like there's always like a specific intention, and like an idea we're trying to kind of get across. And so we know what we're shooting for the day when we step onto set. And then we've already had those conversations before, you step in on set with all of your collaborators. We had rehearsal time, like 2 weeks of rehearsal with our actors. And so that space for us is very sacred because you're also communicating your intentions with your actors. And so, of course, when you're on set, you have to be flexible. Anything could change, the day could change. And so, but our whole team is all kind of like heading toward that same beacon of light,
Sure.
And so, yeah.
And I think it's like you try to set a tone, because directing is, sure, you're making a ton of decisions, but you're also leading in lots of like clear and really invisible ways. So, we do try to set a tone where asking a question or saying like, wait, let's hold a minute, like isn't threatening,
Mhm.
it's not, it actually means we're doing good work and we're being very present tense. And so we build that into our process. So if there's a moment when we need to say like, okay, 1 second, like we need to chat, like that's not like emergency, the director having like a sidebar. It's actually just, it's like, okay, like before we move forward, we need to check in with each other. And that's calm, that's every day, and so it's like you try to set this tone, and that also invites other people to say like, I have a question or this, and it doesn't feel like alarming or out of the ordinary. And you can set that very like comfortable, confident pace that works for your process. And that's something that we try to do too.
I love that.
I want to ask each of you, because what I love about your filmmaking is that like you already have so much experience behind the camera in terms of like editing and cinematography, camera operating. I was just wondering if each of you could speak on maybe a specific experience that you had in those fields that helped shape maybe the way you narratively wanted to direct this feature, because I would imagine you learned so many lessons in those aspects, but was there one that was really important to each of you that kind of helped you in this setting?
I think for me, just kind of as an editor, you're always thinking about story, structure, pacing, and also you're an observer, and I've done a lot of work in documentary, and so you're just kind of always observing people in the footage. And I think I take that with me on set and think a lot about, like how are we capturing this image, and what is like this specific moment, in the whole of the film. Like I think I've also developed the ability to kind of retain an entire film in my head, because I like to edit when I'm not in front of the Avid or Final Cut or Premiere, whatever platform it is. And so when we're on set, I'm like, okay, I know exactly where this beat lands. And again, as an editor, that may change, but like being sure that we're capturing kind of like the essence of this scene. And so, I think that's been a helpful tool for me to apply when we're working on set.
It's got to be interesting, by the way, to think about that, because with the editing, I would imagine you probably are editing your scenes already in your mind as you're shooting them, which is fascinating in itself. But you're working on as a director in this case. But what about on the camera operating and the cinematography angle of things? Was there something that kind of like you go, oh, that was something that really helped me with this feature storytelling?
Yeah, I came up like pretty traditionally in the camera department. I was a focus puller for a long time before I started operating. And so I actually think that being a first AC, first and foremost, is like I draw from that learning bed so often, because I had the best seat in the house. I was by the camera, and I got to witness so many conversations between DPs, directors, actors. That's where you are, I came up, there was not, I wasn't doing remote focus. I was pulling manually on the side of the camera. So, that's where I was with my whip. But one of the things that I think a lot about is psychologically for actors, like where the camera is can really change performance. And so sometimes you want to close up for various reasons. And sometimes, there's so many ways to achieve a close-up. You can physically be close to somebody, to do that. You can be 100 feet away, and so just like thinking about the end goal, but also the process, and being really aware of what every single thing you put into the room, meaning like every person that's in there, every tool, like that's affecting performance as much as anything else. There's sometimes when I was firsting, I was also, there was no remote control for the camera. So sometimes I was the only person in the room with an actor. It would be mics planted, and I had to be in there to start and stop the camera and pull. So it's like stripping down and I think a lot about like how to protect the process for your performers.
Just a quick follow-up on that, because our audience are huge filmmaking fans, and I'm actually genuinely curious about this because manual focus pulling sounds like an incredible, cool job. Like I would love to like play with that. Like could
also
you give
like
us
anxiety inducing. It feels like it'd be like, because you could be responsible for like not ruining, but like if an amazing take. Sorry, Kevin.
But can you give us like maybe like a play-by-play of how maybe like a rack focus would work or something like something that you would do? I just find that fascinating.
Well,
it's cool.
When I started learning, I started ACing in school. I was like a camera tech, and I came into film through photography. So I was working in dark rooms, and I was a photographer's assistant, like a 35 and medium format photographer's assistant. So there was a lot of overlap, and like if you know how to fix it, that was kind of the mentality. It was like you can be here. And that's how I started ACing on undergrad and grad student films, and then kind of going from there. But at the time, it's like when I was learning pulling focus, you don't have a monitor, you didn't have, you were there. And so you're looking at old focus chart books based on aperture and distance. And it's, you're looking at your focal range. So you may have 12 inches of acceptable focus, or you may have 4 feet of acceptable focus. And the decision is about like, there's really amazing because you got to have conversations. Am I splitting the focus so both these actors are in the acceptable range, or am I drawing the focus, just to one of them? And the best thing is that like that muscle, what you do is you watch and you have to learn and anticipate how people are going to move, because and it's like, what is the tell? Is it an inhale before the step? Or, and you just narrow your entire focus. It's like this Zen, pure present tense vibe. And it's scary as, I don't know, can I swear on this? But it's
yes, you absolutely can.
Scary as fucking hell. And, there was, I was a focus puller, I was first AC on a film, and there were trick pool shots, and it was one of those things where we were shooting on 16, and they wanted to start tape, they wanted to start going to film on the first take, because there was all this complicated stunts with the pool, with trick pool shots, and like it's gonna take her 30 takes to get it right, or of course, the first one, I didn't know where the ball was going. It was all these things, and it's like the first one goes in, and I was like, I know it's not sharp. I like, trust me, this is what I do. That was not sharp, and like to feel that responsibility and know what it's like for everyone on your set is coming with like those anxieties, that pressure, wanting to do a good job. And so it's like on our set, like first and foremost, it's like recognizing everyone's there. They're humans. Like people make mistakes. It's okay. Like, we're making a movie, like, anyways.
No, thank you. I've always been curious about that. Jay, go ahead.
I just got anxiety just hearing that story.
It's amazing.
There's a really small detail in this film that I loved, and it's they're talking about why the men don't learn how to swim, and they say that they don't learn how to swim because if someone falls in, they don't want to be inclined to go after that person. So what I thought was fascinating is that even before the plot of this film really kicks in, there's such a deep understanding of this very specific community and the culture. So I'm just sort of curious, how much homework did you have to do just on the world before you even began filming so that it would kind of ring true and feel more authentic when the plot of the film starts kicking in?
Yeah, we spent about 2.5 years in development on the script with our screenwriter Shane Crowley and our producer Paula Cronin O'Reilly, and they're both from Kerry in Ireland, which is essentially where the town of this film is inspired by. And so we, during that process of development, actually traveled to Ireland to kind of stay with them, but then also immerse ourselves in the world, in the environment, meet people there, and try to get as much of a cultural understanding of this place and the people as we could. So yeah, that took about like 2.5 years for us.
Yeah. And it was, that script development time was just like critical for this movie. And, some of it was like, what is going to be spoken out loud and what can we do visually? What can we do just with audio in terms of, we're talking about teaching our audience this world, the shorthand, the way that a death feels here, like how commonplace a drowning is, like the way, grief is dealt with in this community is just as much kind of like teaching space as it is an event that happens at the beginning of our film. So we knew that we wanted to be immersing our audience right from the beginning. And yeah, there was a lot about like, well, what will we see? Like, what are the places where you're going to return to? What are the motifs where you're going to return to? Like, you know, the decision to begin just on a shot of water and hold on that. And, you know, it's like, study this, pay attention to this. It's going to be again and again part of the story that we're telling, like, tune into this rhythm now. And, you know, every time we needed to draw our audience back to that, like, we would return them to water.
Love that.
You know, I wanted to bring that up. I'm glad you brought up that first shot, because I feel like water and wind are characters in this movie in a way. And I find it fascinating because like a lot of those elements are very unpredictable, I would imagine. And I was just curious, like in terms of both of those, you know, obviously the water and everything you have, the shots are incredibly real, but like in terms of wind and weather, how hard were those aspects in terms of production? And boats have to be incredibly hard to shoot. I remember Christopher Nolan talking about Dunkirk and how insanely hard it was to film those scenes on the water. It's just so unpredictable, and the water pushes you in different places. So just talk about those elements, wind and water, and kind of how they factored into your production.
Yeah, the water days that we were on the boats were the most challenging for sure. Also, like probably the worst weather we had of our entire shoot.
Which was good, like for what we were
like, thank you for this bad weather.
There were a lot of days that were sunny and we're like, wait, we don't need this. But yeah, the water days were very cold, very windy. And the forces that we were actually working against were the tides, you know, so the story kind of relies on telling the story of the tide coming in. And so we had to shoot around the tides. And our AD spent about like our whole time of pre-production going to this oyster farm every single day and just really tracking like where it's at, you know, the calendar. But then obviously there are things that are unpredictable. And so the water would never be at the height that we needed it to be to kind of shoot these scenes, especially that climactic moment. And so our whole team, they would like move those trestles like back and forth, depending on like how high the water needed to be. And it was very time consuming and very strenuous. I think we all, like even our actors, pitched in to move them. And then, you know, we had to kind of leave the shore. You have to go like a certain path because we were on an actual working oyster farm. So we had to, the boats had to go this path around that farm to protect it and then go to where we had built our farm. And because of that, it would take like half an hour to get back to dry land. And so I don't think like anyone wanted to use the restroom because, you know, it was just a time suck. And so, that just physically was very challenging. There are so many other stories, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about shooting on water is, you know, your camera is also on water. Yeah. So like there is no base. Like, you know, we had a crane on a boat. So we have a camera boat, and there are, you know, ways you can stabilize at the head level of that crane, but you're still on water. Like everybody is on water, so you're watching a monitor, you're moving, you know. So there's like just the actual like base level elements there. It was really challenging, but it was also very rewarding. Like the end of those days, like. So spent. And but then we get back on land and like someone's handing you like a mug of tea and like a slice of pizza, and you're like looking around, you're like, we couldn't have done this without every single person that like we see. Like it required everyone and all of everyone. And I feel like after that there was just this kind of like felt like a family, like from those days. Yeah, it was special.
You know, I think what's fascinating, but also kind of terrifying and heartbreaking about this story is that while it's perfectly told in this community and in this culture, I feel like it's a story that could be told in just about every community on the planet and it would still fit. And I'm sort of curious if you could just talk about unfortunately, how universal a story like this is and how it could be told in different aspects in different communities around the planet.
Yeah, what makes this film culturally specific is not that it deals with sexual violence. Sexual violence is a universal problem that erodes communities like around the world, and has been, you know, like part of what we were trying to do in the kind of tone of this film was, you know, like this problem isn't new. This, you know, these are cycles that we have been going through, and this kind of like mythic Greek tragedy element to it. It's like we have been dealing with these very human problems and dealing with them and dealing with them and dealing with them. And so we very much wanted it to feel like out of time in that way. And yes, you're right. What, you know, this could happen. This story could happen in lots of places. And the things that we tried to, you know, it does specifically take place in the west of Ireland. And so therefore we must make it very specific to the culture of that place and that community. And, you know, so in no means is this exclusively an Irish story, but like for this to work, it had to be, you know, like that was kind of our philosophy. Like you have to get very specific. Film.
Yeah. And I think, you know, just like but themes carry over, right? And especially here, we are a country of immigrants. And so thinking about even religion, right? Like as a theme, I think that resonates in many places, or kind of like small town community, working class people, tensions within families, words that are unsaid. I think a lot of us can relate to those things. And so, or like family dynamics, right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of themes that I think will resonate with many people.
You know, this is interesting. I was talking earlier about some of the unpredictable elements in terms of like water and the weather, but also a baby is a really interesting thing in terms of filmmaking. And I've talked to actors about this before, and kind of how it's done on set. They'll bring in like twins and they'll switch them out in between process. But I mean, sometimes you can't control, obviously you can't control what they're going to do, or what noise they're going to make. In terms of that, like how does that set a certain term of like preciousness on set of like making sure, is it just one baby, or were they twins? Like how did you figure that out?
There were three to start.
Not related, well, actually two of them were cousins, but they're not like triplets. They just have and it's challenging. I mean, you just don't know. You can't give babies direction.
So you're and you know, Erin, Toni O'Rourke, our actress who plays Erin, was just incredible with the children. And so it's really, I think too, about how the actor kind of interacts with the baby. And so I think she just kind of instinctively knew how to calm baby Oscar when he was crying. And but yeah, you know, you have limited hours to shoot, to work with children. So there's that like restriction to begin with. And then if they're crying, you can't, unless you need that, you can't really shoot it. And so I don't think we had like too many days.
Oh, we got very, very lucky. And we did that a lot of times when we were breaking it down. It was like, Oscar is part of this scene, but what shots is he part of, you know? And it was like, you know, many times it's like he's only there on set in those shots, and being very, you know, it's like you almost have to storyboard it like a stunt sequence, because it's baby, and so we had to get very specific about that. But then when we're doing, like Celia said, when we were doing the casting process, we had the adults cast, you know, so we brought Emily, we brought Toni to meet the young the babies that we were planning to work with, and make sure that their parents were comfortable, and that, like, you know, kind of that everybody felt comfortable with the situation. And I mean, one cool Easter egg is I gave birth while we were in the edit, and so I have a baby, and we got to sample my baby's laughter and use it.
What? Wait, your baby did ADR unknowingly?
ADR, that was her first gig. So
that is amazing. Wait, if you don't mind me asking, I'm gonna follow up on this real fast, because again, I always think about this like with actors, but actors and dogs, and actors and babies. Throughout a production, you're gonna gain an emotional attachment to these people, and so like, do you like meet? I mean, you mentioned the parents, like are they, I know they're there, but like, do you get emotionally attached to the baby? Like, do you miss the kid? I mean, I feel like, I mean, again, you gave birth during the edit, as you mentioned. I just feel like that's got to be an interesting thing to disconnect from at the end.
I mean, for us, it was like the days that we were shooting with the dogs, we were like so giddy because we're like dog people. So it was like, we're like, let's write more dog scenes. So the dogs just show up and they're like all goofy, and like everybody immediately was like so happy. And so yeah, I was like, it was always sad when it was like, oh, we're wrapping the dog. So but yeah, I mean, I think you do form a family. I don't think it's exclusive to like cute things, but the like, you know, especially we were making this film during COVID. So it's like our whole world, like more than any other movie making experience I've ever had, was like our crew, you know? And it was just like that, when we called like cut on the last day, like it was like really heartbreaking. You know, we lived in Ireland for almost 6 months while we were making this. So
that's what I was going to say. Like the land, you know, for us, the land is a character in this film. And I think that we fell deeply in love with, and we spent so much time there. And because of COVID, you know, this typically very touristy area was kind of devoid of people. And so we just had the land to ourselves and really fell in love with it. And I think, I miss that deeply. So
your baby might need top billing now on that poster. Might have to.
You got special thanks. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh, that's cool. So I have to admit, I rarely get excited over like a movie studio. I think the last time I would like look forward to a studio releasing movies was probably Pixar. But I get really excited whenever I see A24 putting a new movie out. Whenever I see their logo pop up before a trailer, I kind of perk up a little bit. And they seem to be a very filmmaker friendly studio, very filmmaker driven. I'm sort of curious, what are your perceptions of that studio in particular and the kind of work that they're putting out and the relationship they seem to have with really great filmmakers, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here today because of A24, you know, so it's like we're incredibly grateful. And we had a unique experience with them because you know, we had developed the film with Screen Ireland and BBC Films. And so we had, you know, we were looking for that other partner, and, you know, those film funding bodies are also public film funded bodies. And there's so much the spirit of like funding art, you know, like it's funding film, but it's funding art, like was really present. And so we needed a partner that matched that saw and like, you know, allowed our process to be like front and center. And, you know, I'm not saying that in like a selfish way. I just think that like, that was what was in motion. And so we needed a partner that was going to like come with that energy and be, like you said, like filmmaker forward. But yeah, I mean, we're also like film fans and film geeks. So it's like,
hell yeah,
to like be part of their repertoire, you know, is to say it's meaningful is like not enough, you know. It's like, yeah, it's really cool for us.
Yeah. That studio means quality. Every time I see that logo, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I was always curious about this. Like every time I watch a movie, I find it interesting where the title card pops up. Sometimes it could be 5 minutes in, it could be 12 minutes in. I've seen it 30 minutes in. I think yours is about 5.5 minutes in. I remember writing it down and I was like, oh, that's cool. I wonder. So like as filmmakers, narratively, what does that mean to you to drop it there? Like, is it a divide? Are you breaking something up? I mean, thematically, I just wonder like how you make the choice, because it's written beautifully. It's like the title card's great. But I just wonder like what the thought process is on that, like from a narrative perspective, because it is a break. You do notice it, right? As an audience member, I just wonder like what your intentions would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we think of it as kind of like a break, a breath, right? Like, okay, or like a new chapter starts here. It's funny because I think while we were still editing, we saw Drive My Car and we're like, oh,
yes,
you push it that far.
Wasn't that like 30 minutes or like 20 minutes in? Yes.
It's insane. But like, that's, you know, and I think that's really cool because it's like, okay, this was one film you watched and now here's the next one. And in the edit for this film, you know, we got to a point where, you know, you were talking about it, the opening images really kind of sum up this place. And so, you know, and we shot a lot of that first part of the film like in a tableau style, and we were talking about it being kind of this picture book. You know, you're flipping through the pages of these people's lives and then you get to this kind of dramatic punctuation, and then now we're going into the rest of the film. And so, yeah, in the end, I think that the title served as, just kind of a break, a pause, a breath. And now we're kind of moving into this new story.
Yeah. I was going to say, cool. Kind of like you said, the dramatic punctuation, because I would say, like, even though the time is very different, where we put the card is the same as drive my car. It's just that, like, in terms of that dramatic punctuation, it's just that that is a much longer time until that break happens. But yeah, we also worked with this amazing designer, Teddy Blanks, on the custom font for it. And Celia and I are very much like emotional font people.
Yes, I love the font. I was like, yes, that font looks awesome. Yeah.
And so, like, you know, it's just like, to be able to storytell at that level, it is very, very fun. You know, that everything can be considered, and it's like really special for us.
Oh, that's fantastic. This is the kind of movie that, in the way the best movies do, is, I think, really going to yield really deep conversations with its audience when it's done. Like, I could see people like walking out and like going and having a drink and just sitting down and talking about so many of the issues that this movie brings up. But I'm curious if those conversations come up on set while you're in the middle of filming. Like, do actors and crew get into debates and conversations about the subject matter while you're actually filming? Like, do those sort of conversations happen while you're making the movie?
I mean, yes, but not in the way you just said. Like, actually, it was like inviting everybody into the film, I feel like, is when a lot of those conversations happened. Because I think it's as much as everyone saying, like, okay, but how are these filmmakers going to deal with the sensitivities of these questions? And, you know, like, I think it was, like, for us important too, to have those conversations. So I feel like as people were kind of like joining our team was more when those like deeper, longer, you know, it was like in a way, a safer space. It would be one-on-one, or, you know, kind of like those early conversations, because they are also about, like, how do you tell this story as a production designer? Isn't in like, how do you make sure that, like, we are, you know, the end of the film, like, Sarah's house, like, looks completely different than the interiors that we have seen. So, like, if we're going to tell a story about, like, switching cinematic perspectives and, like, offering hope and offering possibility and a blank slate, like, that is a decision that is going to be reflected in the production design in a very different way. So we needed to be on the same page about, like, thematically, what are we doing? What are questions?
Oh, interesting.
Type of stuff.
But I would say, for, like, maybe not debate, but debates didn't happen on set necessarily, but I think, like, new discoveries would happen, especially for the actors, right? Like, within a scene, even though we'd rehearse, there'd be like a way that someone would say something, and then it would make someone else, like, realize, oh, actually, like, that intention or what that actually pulled out of me is kind of different now, and, like, let's go with that thought. And I always thought that was exciting, especially in kind of like our, like, long oneers, you know, where it's just like they both actors, I think, you know, there's a scene with Aisling and Paul where they're talking at the bar, and that's like, we're shooting through a mirror, and it's you know, just a oneer for a few minutes, and they're just kind of organically having this conversation and feeling off of each other's kind of emotional responses in that moment, and then it kind of something like turns, right? And then they're like, okay, actually, let's try this. And I don't know. So I think there's a lot of, like, beautiful discoveries that happen when, you know, you're in the moment filming a scene.
I know, Jake, you're going to wrap us up. I just want to give a shout out to Chase Irvin, by the way, who did amazing work on this. And also we had Andrew Dominic on next week and he shot Blonde, which is incredible as well. So great, amazing DP. So Jake, go ahead and wrap us up.
We're unfortunately, we are out of time. But seriously, ladies, thank you so much for joining us on ReelBlend. I would really love this conversation, and we want to make sure everyone gets out and goes to see God's Creature. So seriously, thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Celia and Anna Rose for coming by the show. Again, if you guys want to hear more about our thoughts on God's Creatures, we're going to review it in full on Friday's full episode. And on that show, we're also going to have David Bruckner, who is the director behind the new Hellraiser film that's coming to Hulu. And you're going to want to hear his thoughts about sort of bringing a franchise back to the mainstream and the challenges of bringing something that has a big fan base back to audiences as opposed to maybe something original like The Night House that he did earlier. Really smart filmmaker, and a very, very fun conversation, especially if you love Hellraiser. This dude really knows his stuff with regards to that. So to make sure you don't miss out on anything that ReelBlend is posting, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and we'll meet you back here soon.